Fat girl begged Mountain Man, "Please don't look at me." He said, "I can't stop looking at you." The mountain road was slick with autumn rain, wheels biting into mud, when the stagecoach carrying Evangeline Morrison shuddered, cracked, and went hurtling into the ravine. The driver's scream cut off as the world flipped. Horses shrieked, then silence, cold, merciless silence. When the dust settled, only one body stirred. Evangeline, Ava, to those few who had ever dared call her by name, dragged a ragged breath. 25, soft in frame, with cheeks round enough to draw cruel whispers in every town she'd passed through. Now her dress was torn, her leg twisted, her arms streaked with blood. She lay among the wreckage for a day and a night, the rain washing over her, the mountain taking no pity. By the time boots crunched through the underbrush, she no longer hoped for life. She thought it must be death come for her at last. But it was not death. It was Elijah Thorne. Once a surgeon in the war, now a recluse in these mountains, Elijah lived with ghosts for company. 31 years old, broad-shouldered, a scar notched across his jaw, eyes the clear blue of highland skies. He had carried too many broken men from battlefield mud to count. He had failed to carry his wife and daughter out of a fever that stole them in a single week. So he had come here to vanish. And yet, there she was, a woman left for dead, lips pale, lashes trembling. His hands, so long trained to cut and sew flesh, moved without thought. He lifted her from the wreckage, her weight nothing compared to the burden he already bore. Ava stirred, whispering in fever, "Don't look at me." Elijah's reply was low, unshakable, "I can't stop." When Evangeline Morrison woke again, the first thing she noticed was warmth, a steady crackle of fire, the faint smell of pine resin. Then the rough-hewn beams above her, a ceiling not of a parlor or an inn, but of a cabin hidden far from town. She tried to move, and pain lanced her leg so sharply that she cried out. A chair scraped back. Heavy boots crossed the floor, and there he was, tall, broad, hair damp from the rain, a shirt rolled to his elbows. He carried a basin of steaming water, and when his eyes met hers, something unspoken passed between them. "You're safe," he said simply. "Your leg is broken. I've said it. You'll need rest." Ava's hands flew to the quilt, pulled over her. You saw me," she whispered, voice shaking. "All of me." Elijah Thorne paused, as if weighing how much truth she could bear. "I saw a woman bleeding and half dead," he answered. "That's all I let myself see. The rest doesn't matter." But it mattered to Ava, always had. Since childhood, she had lived with the sting of whispers, the fat girl who walked too heavily, who would never be chosen at dances, who would never find a husband. She turned her face away, ashamed of her round cheeks, ashamed of how much space she occupied, even in this stranger's bed. "Please," she choked, "don't look at me. I know what I am." Elijah set the basin down and knelt beside her, his voice a steady current. "You think I care about curves or scars? I've seen men with half their bodies gone, clinging to life because someone cared enough to stay. You're alive. That makes you worth looking at." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her temples. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not her family, not her neighbors, not anyone. In the days that followed, her shame battled with his persistence. He cooked broth and coaxed her to eat. He read aloud from a worn medical journal, his voice low and even, while she pretended not to listen, though every word anchored her to the world. At night, when pain robbed her of sleep, He adjusted her splint with hands careful as prayer, and slowly Ava began to notice things about him, too. The way his eyes softened when he fed the fire, the way silence hung around him, not heavy with judgment, but with grief he never named. She glimpsed a portrait tucked into a drawer, two faces, a woman and a child, drawn in fading ink. She did not ask, he did not offer, but she understood. One evening, as wind howled against the shutters, Ava whispered, "You saved me when no one else would have found me. Why?" Elijah looked into the flames, jaw tight. "Because I couldn't save them," he said at last, "and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it." The words lodged in her chest, more painful than the broken bone. She realized then he wasn't simply keeping her alive out of duty. He needed her survival as much as she needed his shelter. And when she drifted into sleep that night, she did not beg him not to look at her. She only prayed he still would, come morning. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of pain and persistence. Ava could not yet walk, but Elijah insisted that healing required more than lying still. When the mountain sun broke through the clouds, he lifted her gently from the bed and carried her to the cabin's porch so she could feel the air on her face. The sight that met her stole her breath, endless ridges rolling in blue haze, trees aflame with autumn colors, hawks wheeling against the sky. It was wild, terrifyingly vast, yet with Elijah's arm steady at her back, it felt like the first time she had ever been allowed to breathe. "I can't stay here," she muttered, more to herself than to him. "I was supposed to teach in Pine Valley. People are waiting." "You're in no condition to leave," Elijah answered. His voice was calm, but absolute. "These mountains won't forgive weakness. You walk too soon, you don't walk again." He built her a pair of crude crutches, teaching her how to balance on them when she grew restless. The first time she tried, she fell hard against his chest. She flushed with shame at how heavy she must have felt in his arms, but he steadied her without a flicker of complaint. "Again," he said, "you'll manage it, just not today." Nights were the hardest. The mountain wind screamed through the pines, rattling the shutters like angry fists. Ava lay awake, listening to the storm, certain that the cabin's walls would give way. But then Elijah would add wood to the fire, and the orange glow would push back the dark. Sometimes he made soup, wild onion, rabbit, and a sprinkle of herbs. The warmth spread through her body until her fear ebbed away. One night, as the blizzard raged outside, she whispered, "I don't understand why you're so kind. You don't even know me." Elisha looked at her across the fire, shadows carving the hollows of his face. "I don't need to know everything," he said. "I know you fought to live. That's enough for me." The words wrapped around her like another blanket. She realized, with a jolt, that she wanted him to keep looking at her that way, like she was more than a burden, more than her body, more than the cruel names the world had thrown at her. As her leg grew stronger, Elijah began to take her on short walks outside. He pointed out which plants were safe to eat and which carried poison. He showed her how to follow deer tracks in the snow, how to tell when a storm was coming by the tilt of the clouds. At first, Ava felt clumsy and useless beside his quiet competence. But then he placed a sprig of wild mint in her hand and said, "This is better in your stew than mine. You've a gift for flavor." The compliment startled her. She had never thought her small domestic skills could mean anything here, in a place ruled by survival. But Elijah treated each of her contributions, sweeping the hearth, stirring the pot, humming softly while she worked, as if they were essential. One evening, after she managed to walk from the cabin to the edge of the stream and back without stumbling, she found him waiting on the porch, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "Told you?" he said simply. She laughed, breathless, proud in a way she hadn't been since childhood. That night she sang a hymn her mother had once taught her, voice trembling but true. Elijah listened in silence, then murmured, "You sound like the hills when they're alive with wind." Ava turned away quickly, afraid he would see her blush. Yet inside, something long dormant stirred. The journey had not taken them far in miles, but it had carried them both across a distance neither thought could ever be crossed. The space between grief and hope, between shame and the first flicker of love. By the time the first snow blanketed Thunder Peak, Eva had grown strong enough to move through the cabin without crutches. Her limp remained, but it no longer defined her. What defined her now were the quiet routines she and Eli had built together, small rituals that turned survival into something resembling home. Each morning began with the smell of coffee. Eli rose before dawn, chopping wood in the yard while his breath puffed in white clouds. Ava would watch from the window, marveling at the precision of each swing, the power coiled in his frame. She thought he looked carved from the same granite that crowned the mountain. When he returned inside, snow melting in his hair, she would place a steaming mug in his hands. "You shouldn't be on that leg so much," he would grumble. "And you shouldn't work before you've eaten," she countered. It became their dance, her stubbornness clashing with his, both secretly warmed by the other's concern. Inside the cabin, she made herself useful in ways she had once dismissed as trivial. She cleaned the shelves, darned his shirts, and discovered joy in cooking meals from whatever Eli brought in from the forest. Rabbit stew with wild onions, cornbread baked in an iron skillet. She learned to stretch ingredients with creativity, and Eli ate every bite as though it were a feast fit for a governor. "You turned scraps into something worth remembering," he told her once, licking his spoon clean. She blushed so deeply she nearly dropped the pot. In turn, he taught her skills she never imagined she could master: how to split logs without splintering them, how to set a snare for rabbits, how to sharpen a knife until it gleamed like silver in the firelight. The first time she'd succeeded in cutting wood cleanly, he clapped her shoulder with a rare smile. "Stronger than you look," he said. Ava laughed. "That's not saying much." "It's saying everything," Eli answered, his gaze steady. She had to look away before the heat in her chest betrayed her. At night, storms often raged outside, the wind howling like wolves against the shutters. Inside, however, the cabin glowed with warmth. Ava sat by the hearth with her embroidery while Eli whittled pieces of wood into delicate figures, birds, deer, once even a small likeness of a woman with flowing hair. She recognized herself in its round cheeks and soft form, though he never admitted it aloud. Sometimes, when the silence grew heavy, she sang. Her voice, uncertain at first, grew stronger with each song. Hymns, lullabies, and once even a silly tavern ballad that made Eli chuckle for the first time she could remember. The sound startled her, rough, unpolished, but honest. She realized she wanted to hear it again, to be the reason he laughed. Despite the peace they found, Ava still wrestled with her reflection. Whenever Eli handed her a polished tin cup, she turned it quickly so as not to glimpse her face. One evening, As she washed dishes by the firelight, she muttered, "I don't understand why you keep looking at me. I don't look like the women in town, not like the ones men choose." Eli set aside his carving and walked to her. He didn't touch her, not yet, but his presence pressed against her like the weight of the mountain itself. "I don't look at you because I must," he said. "I look because I can't help it. When you smile, this place feels less empty. When you sing, I forget every ghost that's haunted me. And when you stand here stubborn and alive, you are the only thing in this cabin that feels more than survival." Her hands shook, water dripping from the tin. She wanted to argue, to retreat behind shame, but something in his eyes held her fast. For the first time, she believed he might be telling the truth. That night, when she lay beneath the quilt, she listened to the sound of him moving about, banking the fire, checking the shutters. And for the first time since the accident, she felt not like a burden to be tolerated, but like a woman, seen, valued, maybe even loved. The mountain had not given them wealth or ease. It had given them something rarer, a fragile, growing tenderness that promised to change them both. The snow was melting by the time news from the valley reached them. A trader stopped by the cabin, swapping dried apples for a carved walking stick, and let slip that the Morrison family in Pine Valley had declared their daughter lost in a tragic accident. Ava froze where she stood, dish rag clutched in her hands. "Declared lost?" The trader shrugged. "Word is, they're settling her affairs. A lawyer from Denver came through drawing up papers. There was talk of an inheritance, some aunt's estate in Boston, but with the girl dead, it'll fall to her kin." Ava's breath left her in a rush. She remembered the letters from her late aunt, always folded neatly and hidden away by her father. She had thought them sentimental scraps, nothing more. But now it seemed her family had hidden something far more tangible. After the trader left, she turned to Eli, her voice tight with panic. "They're saying I'm dead. My own family is trying to steal what belongs to me." Eli's jaw tightened. "Then they'll come here. If money's involved, they won't stop until they've wrung every ounce of it from you." He was right. Weeks later, hoofbeats echoed in the clearing, and a knock, too sharp, too demanding, shook the cabin door. It was Thomas Morrison, Ava's younger brother, flanked by two strangers with rifles slung over their shoulders. His face wore a mask of false concern. "Ava," he said smoothly, "thank God you're alive. We feared the worst." She stared at him, reading the lie in his eyes. Feared? Or hoped? Thomas chuckled, pretending not to hear. "Come home, sister. Let us take care of you. You don't belong in a shack with a hermit." He cast a sneer at Eli. "People are talking. They say he found you half dead and kept you like some kind of trophy." Heat rushed to Ava's cheeks. Before she could speak, Eli stepped forward, his presence filling the doorway. "She stays if she wishes to. You'll not take her by force." The taller of the strangers smirked. "Careful, Doc. You're outnumbered." Doc. The word spread like wildfire. Thomas must have told them Eli's past, that he had once been a surgeon, that he carried skills worth exploiting. When the men rode off with promises to return, Ava sagged into a chair, her hands trembling. "They'll try again, and they won't stop until they ruin you too." That night, by the fire, the silence between her and Eli was heavier than stone. She broke it first. "You should let me go. If I leave, they'll have no reason to bother you." Eli turned sharply, eyes flashing with something close to anger. Is that what you think? That I've kept you here out of charity? Ava, I buried my family in this mountain. I built these walls to keep out the world. And for months I've wished for nothing but silence. Then you came. Her heart twisted. I'm not worth losing your peace over. You're wrong, he said, voice rough. I'd lose every shred of peace before I'd lose you. The words seared into her, but fear gnawed at her still. Her family had always made her believe she was a burden, something to be hidden or bartered away. Could it truly be different with him? Days later, her fears were tested. Thomas returned, this time with a man named Vincent Hawthorne, a slick-tongued schemer from Denver with legal papers in hand. Vincent claimed Ava was mentally unfit after her accident, that Eli had manipulated her into staying. The sheriff from Pine Valley, bribed and hesitant, accompanied them. Ava stood frozen, torn between old loyalties and new courage. When Vincent declared she was incapable of deciding her own fate, Eli's voice thundered across the room. She is more capable than any of you, and if you try to drag her from this cabin, you'll answer to me. Ava looked from Eli to the men who had always belittled her, and for the first time in her life, she raised her chin and spoke without trembling. I am not weak. I choose to stay, and I will not let you steal what is mine, my life, my inheritance, or my heart. Her defiance lit a fire that even the blizzard outside could not smother, but the battle had only just begun. The storm rolled in fast, wind howling through the pines like the warning of an old god. Eli sensed it wasn't just weather. He had seen too many campaigns, knew the feel of battle before the first shot was fired. He loaded the rifle with steady hands while Ava gathered the lamp oil, her eyes wide but resolute. By dusk, hoofbeats cracked across the clearing. Lantern light flickered between trunks as Thomas Morrison and Vincent Hawthorne appeared with half a dozen hired guns. Snow churned under their boots as they advanced toward the cabin. Ava, Thomas called, voice sharp, step outside. These people can't protect you forever. You're coming home. Eli pushed open the door, rifle in hand, his frame filling the threshold. She's already home, Vincent sneered, lifting a parchment. This says otherwise. By law, she is unfit, and custody falls to her family. Step aside, doctor. Law forged by bribes and lies isn't law at all, Eli growled. Behind him, Ava placed a trembling hand on his arm. Let me speak. She stepped into the lantern light, the snowflakes clinging to her dark hair. Her voice, though shaken, carried across the clearing. I was never enough for my family. Too fat, too plain, too much trouble. But she nodded toward Eli. He sees me, and I see him. I will not leave. For a moment, silence. Then Vincent snapped his fingers. The hired guns raised their rifles. The first shot split the night. Wood splintered by Eva's shoulder. Eli dragged her inside just as bullets peppered the walls. He returned fire through a window, his aim deadly precise, honed from the battlefields of his past. One gunman dropped into the snow. The rest hesitated. Ava's heart thundered, but she didn't cower. She lit the lamp oil and hurled it toward the porch, flames roaring up in a barrier of fire. Stay back, she cried, her voice stronger than she thought possible. The blaze spooked the horses, sent them rearing. In the chaos, the sheriff of Pine Valley, summoned at last by townsfolk who'd grown suspicious, arrived with deputies. Their whistles cut the night as they surged into the clearing, weapons drawn. Thomas's face twisted in rage. You've ruined everything, he spat. The deputies wrestled him down, while Vincent tried to slip away into the trees, only to be seized by the law. When it was over, snow fell quietly again, smothering the last hiss of flames. The cabin stood scarred but unbroken. Inside, Ava collapsed against Eli, breathless, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You could have been killed," she whispered. He cupped her face, dirt and ash smeared across his hands. "I'd die 100 times before I let them take you. You're my reason to live, Ava. Do you understand that now?" And in that moment, as the firelight flickered across his weary eyes, she did. She understood it with every beat of her heart. Winter broke slowly that year. The snow melted in quiet rivulets, the river below the ridge swelling with spring thaw. The cabin, though scarred with bullet holes, glowed each evening with warm lamplight. Inside, Ava moved carefully, her limp almost gone, her laughter brighter than Eli had ever heard. She filled the rooms with small touches, embroidered curtains, wildflowers in tin jars, the smell of fresh bread on the table. It no longer felt like a place for one man to hide, but a home built for two hearts. One evening, as dusk fell violet over the peaks, they sat together near the fire. The flames danced across Eli's scarred face, softening the shadows. He reached for her hand, his thumb tracing slow circles on her skin. "You're safe here," he said simply. Ava's throat tightened. For so long she had begged the world not to look at her, terrified of the judgment in every gaze, but here, in his eyes, she found no judgment at all, only love, steady and fierce. "It feels like home," she whispered. His arm wrapped around her shoulders, pulling her close against his chest. They sat in silence, listening to the wind in the pines, the crackle of firewood, the beating of two hearts that had somehow found each other against every odd. Yet outside, the mountains held their secrets. Beyond the ridge, the town still whispered, family grudges still lingered, and men like Vincent Hawthorne seldom vanished for long. Ava closed her eyes, letting herself believe just for tonight that love could be enough. The question hung in the firelit air. Would their love be strong enough to stand against the world beyond these walls? Stories like Ava and Eli's remind us that sometimes the world tries to tell us we are unworthy, unlovable, or too broken to ever be chosen. But love, when it is real, refuses to listen. It sees past scars and insecurities and holds on anyway. Every time I read your comments, I'm reminded how stories connect us across distances, languages, and lives. Where are you listening from tonight? Do you still believe love this fierce exists in our world? Share your thoughts below. And if you do believe, don't go anywhere. The next story is waiting just for you.